Welcome back to another episode of Strength in the Details. I am here with Mark Roberts, who, if you are unaware and haven't been following the podcast for long, Mark was my first guest on episode 1 of the podcast, and I'm really excited to have him back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back and talk more coaching, more weightlifting, all things related to the gym.
Mark, in the last 2 years, I think that I've seen you at every competition, whether it's local or national, and I think we've had enough conversations to maybe have recorded an episode of really great weightlifting content. And so I'm going to try my best to replicate some of that here so that people can get into the minds of us at a competition that we've been on our feet for 10 plus hours a day. That's okay.
That sounds good. Yeah, hopefully we're not as delirious from coaching for a whole day when we're having this conversation. So it should make a little bit more sense as well.
I hope not. Well, for those that have been living under a rock and don't know who you are, tell the people who you are and how you got into weightlifting.
So I am the head coach of Rise Weightlifting, and I own Rise Athletics, a strength and conditioning facility in Winter Garden, Florida. I've been a weightlifter myself for 12 years, so competing for about 12 years. And I very quickly became a weightlifting coach after I started competing. I picked up the snatch and the clean and jerk as a way to improve my strength and power output for rugby. And when unfortunately a rugby injury took me out of that sport, it was very natural for me to fall into weightlifting. And then the combination of strength and conditioning and the sporting environment in which weightlifting creates really kind of captured my attention as a coach, because I was not only working with the skill-based aspect of the sport, but I was also taking control of the strength and conditioning, which is, I think, a unique aspect of weightlifting that really drew me to it and has really kept me in the sport ever since.
So you did not go through the CrossFit route and just despise cardio and then jump into weightlifting like probably 75% of the weightlifting community.
No, I actually I had a very cool introduction to weightlifting where it was traditional weightlifting. I learned the movements from a strength and conditioning coach over here in the United States when I was at university in England. And then when I went back and could no longer play rugby, I transitioned into a weightlifting club immediately versus going into a CrossFit gym. So my introduction was actually a very small weightlifting club called Worley Weightlifting in central England while I was finishing off my last year of university. And like you say, I trained a lot in CrossFit gyms, so it was always funny to me because CrossFit actually allowed me to continue training when I wasn't at my weightlifting club. So just like many coaches, weightlifting coaches, I owe a lot to CrossFit for allowing me to have an environment where I could train. And obviously just introducing more people to those movements as well. So I do not despise CrossFit. I own a CrossFit affiliate, so I'm a big CrossFit fan. Just like everything, it can be done very badly or it can be done properly in my eyes. And so just like I'm sure we're going to talk about in our conversation today, I think that it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Amen. And I think you're preaching to the choir. And we will definitely jump into cross training different modalities, because I think that's really important in weightlifting. But I first want to talk about your experiences as an athlete. Because I think that a lot of people know and love and respect you as a coach. And then every once in a while, we see you throw on a singlet and get on the platform. So what was your experience like as an athlete, and how did that kind of transition into your coaching role?
As a weightlifting athlete, I actually just posted a video yesterday. I'm not sure if you caught it, but it kind of described my love for the sport and why I love it so much. And I would say one of the biggest things was that in all sports I've played, primarily team sports, I've loved the training aspect. But you always kind of hang your expectations on a collective group when it comes to competing. And something that I enjoyed being able to do after college when life kind of takes over is that weightlifting allows you to train if you want to by yourself. You're in so much control over the outcome. And this is what I spoke about in that video, is that it's really empowering. You don't have to wait for a collection of people to show up at a field to be able to practice. It's really a you and a barbell kind of sport. And so as an athlete, I found that it allowed me to really control the process, which is kind of how I've developed my coaching technique as well, is being a very process driven coach. And so it mirrors my personality, it mirrors my goals very well as a sport. And so as an athlete, I just can't think of anything better than being able to compete in a sport where the outcome is really decided by me and my actions from start to finish.
Love that. And I think one of the transitions here is that when we transition from an athlete to a coach, I know I experienced this, and Danny Camargo had to kind of coach me through this, is you lose some of the athlete first mentality, and you start to put your own athletes first and their well-being first. Could you talk about that process for you? How did what are some things that you took advantage of? What were some mindset shifts? And how do you prioritize it now, being a business owner and a coach, as well as still loving to train for the sport as an athlete?
Well, that's a good question. I have a lot of young coaches ask me that question directly. How do I manage being a coach and an athlete? And I think the short answer is that you don't. You have to really decide what it is that you want. Do you want to coach? Do you want to be an athlete? But the deciding factor for me was once I understood that even though I have many goals, once I attained a goal in weightlifting, or a PR, for example, you can throw a kilo on and then the barbell wins again. And so it's very much that for me, I found when I was more excited for other athletes to hit PRs and to see their excitement when they hit those PRs, and it actually was not that I'm not excited about hitting a PR, but it meant more for me to see somebody else overcome something that they actually thought might be an impossibility 3 days prior, 4 days prior, a month prior, a year prior, to see them be able to break down that mental barrier by physically achieving something and seeing how empowered they feel when I hit that point. That's when I knew I was really a coach, and I was no longer primarily an athlete. I was primarily a coach. And the mindset shift for me, I think, with that is that I knew that I could always throw some more kilos on the bar, and then there would be another battle the next day. There was always another PR to fall. There was another goal to attain. And so as beginners and as intermediates, we find a lot of success in the results. And that's where we get a lot of our pleasure in the sport, really, is from PRing, hitting a competition, qualifying for nationals. But if anybody is familiar with the story of Sisyphus, I'm a big philosopher, just so you kind of get an idea. But there's a story of Sisyphus that he basically was punished by the gods, but he was given a task to always push a rock up the hill. And when the rock fell down the hill, he had to push it back up again. And he actually was extremely happy, and it infuriated the gods because he always had something to do and he always had something to achieve. And so he had never finished that task. And I feel like that's really where where I'm at now with weightlifting is as a coach, I love seeing people achieve things, but as an athlete myself, just being able to pick up a barbell on a daily basis and just be able to move and just be able to see what it's given me over the years is really what I do it for now. It's that constant drive to refine a technique, to get better at something each day, that keeps me coming back to it and keeps my mindset where it is. And I try and get a lot of my athletes to transition from that initial results orientated mindset into more of that process over time.
I'm gonna definitely look up that story. So thank you for sharing with us, because I think that's the mindset that creates longevity in a sport like weightlifting, right? Because there's always going to be the rock that you have to push up the hill, and once you reach the top of the hill and the rock falls back down, you have to start the process over again. And I feel like there's always something to improve and something to work on in weightlifting. Despite it only being two main lifts, there's so much that goes into that. And so we'll definitely circle back to that when we talk about coaching philosophies. But For a moment, I kind of want to stay on this coaching and talk about your success as a coach and a business owner. Tell us about Rise Athletics, Rise Weightlifting. Where did it originate for you?
For me, Rise Athletics, it came about pretty quickly. Um, I had a coaching business before Rise Athletics, and I owned a weightlifting club beforehand. But the name Rise and Rise Athletics and Rise Weightlifting came from when I was working in another gym, and unfortunately, we had to move very quickly, and I was not going to be affiliated with those same coaches, that same gym, and I decided that it was time for me to go out by myself. What I wanted to do was have a brand that really empowered people. I wanted people to see something that I think is missing a lot in today's culture, and that's about just having an abundance mindset, having a growth mindset, knowing that life isn't a zero sum game. That magic happens when people come together and empower each other and support each other and have a community that uplifts instead of tears you down. And so Rise Athletics, Rise Weightlifting kind of came about from that idea that even though weightlifting is an individual sport, any weightlifter that's been in the sport for an appreciable amount of time knows how important that team is around you. And although, like we said earlier, they don't directly impact my results on the platform, they have a huge impact on my daily life, on the support they give me, on bringing me up when I have a bad day, on being able to feed off my energy. If I'm having a good day and somebody else is having a bad day, I can bring them up purely because I can give them some of my energy. And we all know what it's like to be in a room full of let's say some anxious people, and we can just feel it. And so Rise was really about, if we can create an environment that empowers people, there's the only objects then that you have to remove from the road are the ones that you have in front of you, that you're your own personal ones. The environment will empower you.
And what is your role as a coach in leading that culture, creating that culture?
I think we as coaches, we play the pivotal first role, of course, right? Because at the beginning, there's one coach, one athlete. It always starts with one person. But we're very fortunate to have a weightlifting team of over 50 members now, and that's within a gym of 200 plus members. And so I think obviously all leaders, all business owners, first and foremost, have to lead by example. If I want a certain outcome, then from my weightlifters, then I have to act in a way that shows them that outcome. It doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be a national level weightlifter to be able to produce national level weightlifters. But if I'm asking everybody else to stretch before and warm up properly before they lift, and I'm not stretching and warming up before I lift, then I'm setting that bad example. I think over time it transitions. At the beginning, it's very easy as a business owner, as a coach, to control your culture. But the larger that team gets, the harder it is to actually control it from yourself as a coach, and it becomes the role of the athletes to actually instill the culture that you want. And every good manager, every good captain of a team knows that it's not them that controls the culture. It's the whole team, and it's what we as a team accept. And if we as a team accept somebody, let's just say simply loading a barbell terribly, and I'm the only person that says, hey, please load the bar properly. But if you have your own teammates saying, hey, let's load the bar properly, we want, like, this is what we do here, then that's going to create that culture, and it's going to keep that culture driving forwards. And at the beginning, you set the culture, but I think at the point we're at now with Rise, I don't set the culture anymore. I try and just help guide the culture. And it's my athletes, my senior athletes, my intermediate athletes that actually teach the culture to the beginners. And I've tried to instill more of a top-down leadership where we have leaders within different roles, as senior athletes, as national level athletes. You could be a youth athlete that's a national level athlete, but I expect you to act as a national level athlete. Even if there are people that have just joined the club and they're 10 years older than you and you're a youth athlete, it doesn't matter. You have the experience to be able to show them how they should be acting in our weightlifting club.
And I believe that creates group cohesion, because it's not coming from top down, it's coming kind of from within and spreading out. And I think that that's actually more powerful from a management and a leadership standpoint, to have the culture, really kind of come from bottom up or from in outward, as opposed from to top down. So congratulations
Absolutely.
on getting to that point. And I know, having a big team, I also, we're a part of a big team clubs. Sometimes you have one bad apple and it kind of, weaves its way in. And, I think to have a strong culture is really an important part of continuing to grow the sport and continuing to have more access and more inclusivity in the sport.
Absolutely. And something that we've done that I know other gyms do as well, but I think has really made an impact is when we talk about culture, we talk about joint values. And a lot of the time we throw the word culture around and we think about food, music, right? We talk about culture in more of an ethnic sense, but I think culture is also predicated on the idea of mutual values. Values that we want to see emulated. If I'm honest with you, I would like you to be honest back with me. And so we actually came up with 8 different values that we created kind of like flags for, and have them up at the gym. So if we actually see somebody that is acting contradictory to our values, we literally can look at the flag and just say, but one of them is communication. And we say honest and open with you, with your coaches, and with your peers. So it's plain and simple. It's right there in front of them, and I think that honesty and that upfrontness, that's a word, is really key to not just creating the culture, but to maintain it over time, because we've put our aims, we've put our values front and center for people to see and people to aim for.
Such a powerful thing. I love the flag idea, and it in and of itself creates transparency. So when you walk in, wait, these values mean something, and it's right there in front of you, so you kind of know what's expected of you when you walk in. And I think that expectation is important. When you work with a beginner who comes in, maybe they come from another gym, maybe they're brand new to the sport of weightlifting, what are some things that you teach right off the bat that has nothing to do with weightlifting technique or programming or, barbell? What do you teach them about the sport of weightlifting?
The sport of weightlifting. I mean, first and foremost, when somebody comes in our gym, we have a deep conversation with them about expectations, just like we said, and we are very transparent about as basic as what is health versus what is fitness. Are you doing weightlifting purely for health, which means that you're trying to add to your life? Or are you doing it for fitness, where you're trying to go to nationals because you'll have to say no to that happy hour with your friends if you have a competition coming up and you're trying to make weight? You're going to prioritize things that might take away from your life in some aspects on the front end, but will give you those goals on the back end. It could be sleep, food, 2 of the biggest examples. And so our conversations really are much broader, and I would say that we layer in the information we need people to understand early on, and we actually talk more and more about weightlifting the better they get at weightlifting. Because I think to begin with, as weightlifters, we are thrown in the deep end with snatch and clean and jerk before we even know how to control our body, before we know recovery, which we spoke about a lot the first time on the podcast. And so I want people to be coachable. I want people to be respectful too. And so it really goes back to those values. I think we front end those values way more than we front end weightlifting. Because if you find the best weightlifters are great teammates. They are reliable. They communicate well. They're humble. They show grit, determination, courage. And so our beginning process for any new lifter is, what person does it require to be a great weightlifter? And then once we start working on that person that you need to be, we can layer in weightlifting for you, and you'll understand it much, much better than if we go, hey, here's a snatch, here's a clean and jerk, let's go.
Right, right. Love that. That's such a great perspective. And I think one of the things that I've talked about a lot, but both on the podcast and just on social media in general, is that as a coach, as an educator, I think that transcends just being in the gym teaching the snatch and clean and jerk. And I think that our bigger goal, and something that you and I share in common that we talk about a lot, is that we're developing people to be better humans. And I think that if you start there and focus on the human development before the athlete development, I think that you come to a synergy where you've helped develop this human to accept what happens during the athletic process.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the building a house on sand versus building a house on rock analogy.
So you not only develop athletes, but you're developing coaches. I've noticed you have some coaches coming up under you. What is that process like, and what do you try to instill in your coaches and your staff, maybe senior level athletes?
Um, that's a really good one because we are a multi sport, multifaceted gym. So we have sports performance, we have powerlifting, CrossFit, strength training, and so from two different aspects, we have around 8 coaches in the gym now, doing all sorts of different disciplines, and we have at least, at last count, I think it's five or six level 1 coaches for weightlifting. And so to start with the weightlifting side of things, I think that it's that top down leadership that we talked about earlier of having different levels. And not only am I trying to develop weightlifters across the board, but for me to manage the amount of weightlifters we have, um, we need to have different levels of coaching where we have our senior athletes that are able to help those younger athletes. We have national level athletes that help our beginner athletes. And I think what that does is give a level of responsibility to those older athletes, those more experienced athletes. It gives them some responsibility, but not only does it give them some responsibility so they feel like they are needed and providing in a fantastic way in the gym, but I think it also provides a really good understanding for the role of a coach in their lives when they look up to us as a coach in the hierarchy of coaching, and they are coaching below them in that hierarchy. It gives a really great perspective for them to be able to understand where we're coming from more often. And I think if you've never coached anybody, it's very hard to be coachable. And that's a key aspect of how I'm trying to develop this team with my fiance Jamie. And what we talk about a lot is that we have so many people. How do we better manage them? And it's definitely from that top down style of, once you get to a certain point, we encourage you to get your level 1. Not only because you can help us out, but because that level 1 is also going to help you as an athlete understand the lifts better. And the best weightlifters understand the snatch and the clean and jerk almost as good as a coach does. And so it's to me, it's the natural progression of an athlete to be able to then take what they're doing and teach others. And as an educator yourself, as a professor, you know that they, if you can't teach it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it, is the common phrase.
Correct.
So if you're a weightlifter and you are trying to understand the snatch and clean and jerk better, teach it, because you
Hmm.
will very quickly figure out ways of communicating that are potentially different from what you're used to, and that in turn will allow you to conceptualize the lifts differently, which in turn will help your lifts.
Yeah. Becoming a coach changed my entire outlook as an athlete. And though it made my athletic pursuits kind of take a back seat, I still became a better athlete in training. I still became a better competitor. I became a better person because you're not communicating to people in the way that you understand it. You have to learn to communicate it in the way that they understand it. And then it kind of goes back to that human development piece where you have to understand the human, the person, not the athlete who's doing the snatch and clean and jerk in order to do that. So that's very powerful. Outside of a level one, what are some coaching credentials that you think are important? What does a good coach need to know? Skills, education, experiences, whatever.
I early on, I'll be very honest with you, I was the guy that wanted as many credentials as possible. Um, I have a list of coaching qualifications, the length of my arm, and they do help. I'm never going to tell people that education isn't important. I think education is extremely important. But the thing that sets coaches apart is their ability to create relationships with people. You could have 3 PhDs, and if you don't know how to relate to somebody, and you don't know how to build a relationship, you don't know how to foster trust, you don't know how to bring out the motivations from within somebody, all of that education is lost. It's pointless if you can't connect with somebody and get them to trust you, because you might know exactly what to do, but if that person doesn't trust you, then it's going to fall on deaf ears. And so I'm a big proponent of education, but the education that I think is thrown at us as coaches is get this next mobility cert, because you'll be able to get everybody more flexible, or get this next strength training cert, or get this next assessment cert, so you can assess people and know where their shortcomings are. And that is important. I will never tell you it's not important, but you should also be seeking education for the human aspect of coaching, of building relationships, of being able to communicate. I see, just a very quick example here is that I see a lot of coaches that have their personality as coaches, and that's the only personality they have. They limit themselves then to only coaching the person that responds to that kind of coaching. And so a very quick thing I talked about with my coaching staff is that we should be the energy balancers. We should be able to balance the energy that we see in front of us. If you have somebody that is shyer, more introverted, and it comes back to arousal levels, which in psychology you are very familiar with, I know. But if somebody's introverted and quiet and they're sitting there in the warm-up chair and they are freaking out, you need to be able to give them confidence. They clearly don't have it themselves, so you need to give it to them. You need to balance that scale for them. Or if you have somebody who's the opposite and they're a pacer and they're a hype man and they just like to get angry and aggressive, and then you might need to relax a little bit, bring the energy down, teach them how to calm themselves, calm their mind, so they don't have erratic thoughts and they don't go onto the platform with this million miles an hour attitude and then rip the bar out of position as soon as it goes off the floor. You need to be able to bring them into that right mindset that's going to benefit them. So if you can go get education on how to relate to that and how to build relationships and how to communicate, that's going to really be the key that allows you to then layer in all the education you have.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I'm also seeing, just to add to that, is, this, and I'd love your thoughts or your perspective on it. And you kind of mentioned it earlier, so it was interesting that you brought this up. I am finding that with the evolution of social media, that there's this myth or this misnomer that you have to be a high level athlete, you have to lift the most amount of weight in order to be the best coach. And we're seeing that consumers, clients, athletes are gravitating towards people that lift really, really well. Maybe they're on an international team. Maybe they are competing for their country or whatnot. But they're not, that doesn't make them a great coach. Well, how do you balance that as a coach yourself?
I think, first of all, to say that not being that I think there is a need to be able to perform the movements yourself to a decent level. And I say decent because it is arbitrary. It is kind of like you can't measure it. And I say that on purpose because it's not the weight that you lift. It's the understanding of the movement you have. I wouldn't say it's a source of frustration, because if you want to, if back in the day, I used to say, if you want to get massive in LA Fitness and you don't know what to do, who do you go ask? You go ask the guy that's massive, right? And I think sometimes that's kind of like one of those Occam's razor. Like the thing that has the least assumptions is usually right, and the guy who is the biggest is like he probably has done something right at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is value in that. I think there is value in high level athletes being able to impart what they've experienced, but I think that's a small part of the uh, overall coaching requirement kind of thing. I I'm someone that will never tell somebody that something is invaluable if it provides insight. Because everything in life, every experience, every conversation, if you pay attention, is valuable. You can, even if it's just to say that, like, no, I don't actually agree with that, and I'm more solid in my opinion of not agreeing. It's still valuable in that way. It's like everything is a choice, even a non-choice is a choice. And
Mm-hmm.
so those athletes that bring people in, I think there's a role that they play in the overall industry. And as much as I would like to say every single person has to find the right coach for them and the perfect coach for them, and nobody can coach unless they have this, and this. That's just not the industry that we work in, and that's just not how how even our country works. We will always have a hierarchy of people that are more competent than others in coaching, just like we have in all other industries. And so to say that people shouldn't go to high level athletes, I think, is wrong. But I think there should be a conversation about how far certain athletes can take you across the board and what you should look for in coaches, and also give people an idea of what they should experience when they are being coached so that they can make informed decisions. Because everybody also has the right to earn a living. And
Right.
if you're a high level athlete, you have a right to share what you've achieved in your sport. You have a right to share that with other people. I'm never going to tell people they don't. But there is a wider, broader conversation about what makes a great coach and what's important for longevity. Because I have so many athletes that have jumped around programs online and then come to us and finally in person, and they're like, oh, but this program's not that different from the one I was following from this person. And I have to explain, no, programming is, there are so many different ways to program and they will all create success. The thing that ties those successful programs together is not the sets, reps, volume, Q value, this, that, the other. It's how that program can be adapted to you during the process. If you have a day where you're meant to max out and you had 4 hours of sleep because a family member passed away, I'm not going to let you max out. But if you
Yeah.
are following that program from a world-class weightlifter that doesn't have an individual relationship with you, you're still going to try and max out. And in turn, you're going to feel like you are less than or incompetent when you don't PR, or you might offset blame somewhere where it doesn't deserve to be placed, all because of some very small nuances that aren't part of a bigger conversation.
Well said. Well said. I appreciate that. What is our coaching profession missing?
Um, and actually, I want to step back a second, because the last question, something I should have added, which I think will give more insight, something I teach all of our coaches at the gym, and I think this places it really well, is we teach all of our coaches that they should educate, motivate, and inspire. Those are our three things that we talk about. And so we talked about coaching credentials. That's your education. They should be able to
Mm-hmm.
educate. We talked about building relationships. That's them being able to motivate. If you can't build a relationship, you can't motivate somebody. So you need that trust. And then this is where your last question comes in. We say you need to inspire. Now, you don't need to inspire by being a world-class weightlifter. Maybe you can inspire by being consistent in your training, by showing that you are also on this road. So the same way that your lifters are on this road, I might just be a couple of miles ahead, a couple of years ahead, but I'm still trying to inspire you through my actions. And when people go to world-class athletes for coaching, even though they might not have the education or the motivation, they're going because they're inspiring. And so I do think it is an important part of being a great coach. But that Venn diagram, if you only sit in the inspire circle and you don't sit in the middle where you inspire, motivate, and educate, then you're missing 2/3 of that puzzle that's really, really important.
Mark, I'd like to put that on a t-shirt somewhere because I think that that was so profoundly well said.
Thank
And
you.
I think it does encompass what we do, you know, and even on different days, we need a different part of that educate, motivate, and inspire. Some days it is about education. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why is this drill gonna work? Why do we need to take a rest day? And then on some days, it's just like, I know you've been having a really tough week. How do we mix this around so that you're successful in the gym, whatever you do? Hey, do you want to come in and just get on the bike and just, pedal and put your earphones in, because that's the kind of day, that's the kind of week you've had. And then there's days where you're like, hey, let's go throw down together on a heavy Saturday and let me show you what I've been doing outside of practice so that I can inspire you to get onto the platform. And I think that that is what we do as coaches, and we need those tools in different ways on different days, and sometimes to different degrees with different athletes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So back to your other question, what are we missing? I think this conversations is what we're so desperate to have more of, is open conversations between coaches. I joke with my other coaches. I say my enemies aren't other gyms. I'm not competing against other gyms. I'm competing against laziness. I'm competing against
Mm.
greed, gluttony. And when we look at the stats for the amount of people that have gym memberships that they actively use in the country, like that's our competition. Our competition isn't other gyms. And I think because we live in these echo chambers in social media a lot of the time, we do see the local CrossFit gym as our enemy versus our teammates.
Mm.
And they really are teammates, because not everybody is going to fit the personality of my gym. Not everybody is going to feel like my gym is home. And I don't want it to be either. I've set my business up in a way that is different to other gyms to provide a different service. And to the competition that I think we've created between gyms is actually what is stifling us from helping more people. I think being able to get together as coaches and discuss things like we are today is the missing piece. We are so afraid of this secret knowledge that somebody has, and it's not secret knowledge. It's that we all have different friends. We have different friendship groups because we have different interests, and so it's the same thing with gyms. We can have different gyms that are all successful, and that's really what I think is missing, is cohesion amongst different gyms and finding a way to come together to help more people versus try and kind of create this secluded environment where we have our secrets, and there are no secrets. It's like programming. Like I said earlier, there are 1,000 different ways to get somebody to their goals, and it's not the program, but it's the adaptation to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And if as a gym we can't adapt to our members and service our members properly, then maybe there's a different gym. Maybe it's not weightlifting. Maybe it is Zumba that somebody wants to go do. And I joke with people. I say, I don't mind what you do. You just have to promise me that you will be the best Zumberer you can be. You know what I mean? Like as long as you work hard, you will get the results. It's like nutrition. If we scream that the only way to eat is to be a vegan, we know that's not true. You can be healthy on a
Right.
plant-based diet. You can be healthy on a keto diet. You can be healthy on a carnivore diet. So many different ways. That's really what's missing, is the open landscape in which we work in. It is still an even distribution, but what we see on social media is a U shape versus an inverted U.
Mm.
So many people sit in the middle, and so many people just want to be healthy, but we've created a picture of our industry where you either have to do absolutely nothing or you need to have veins on
Mhm.
your abs, and there's no middle ground anymore. And if we
Yeah.
as coaches could come together and say, look, no, not all my members have six packs and are shredded and have veins everywhere. Like the average person in my gym looks like an average person,
Right.
and that's very normal. We know that how you look doesn't necessarily indicate how healthy you are on the inside. We know there's different levels of metabolic markers in your health, and we know there's strength markers that we want to hit. And having that open, transparent look into what we do as coaches is something really important that I don't think we actually talk about enough with the public.
I agree. I also noticed, just to kind of add to that, there's this idea that you have to agree in community to be a community, right? If I don't agree with your programming metrics, you and I don't have anything to discuss. If I don't agree with your competition strategy, then you and I have nothing to discuss. Where I think that that is the beauty of weightlifting, right? No, there is an ideal technique, but like how many people actually are going to hit that ideal technique? And you don't have to have that particular technique to be successful. And I think that the more that we can agree that we don't have to all think the same and get to the same conclusions in order to learn from one another and to have this community that you just described. And I think that's the beauty of, being able to work in this community of Florida coaches. We get to a meet and in the back room, we are talking strategy about something, and five coaches have five different ways of getting, someone to their ultimate goal. And I think that is the beauty of weightlifting. And I think that we need more of that. I think we need more open discussion about that.
I agree. I completely agree, because something we have at the moment in culture is that, like, disagreeing with somebody is somewhat violent. It's like an
Hmm.
attack, and it's like it's not an attack, and it's also like, just because I disagree with you, I don't have an irrational fear either of you.
Yeah.
I just simply, I've lived my life and you've lived your life, and I've come to this conclusion and you've come to this conclusion. And to put it simply, I tell people all the time, I'm like, the most simplified value structure I have in my life is whether you want to increase or decrease the suffering of those people around you. And if I disagree with you, but you're not increasing my suffering, then like, why would I take that any further? Like, I disagree on favorite food. I'm sure we have different favorite foods, like, but it doesn't become a violent rhetoric of, oh, you're wrong. Why can't, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier about like a zero sum game of, we can't both be right.
Mm.
And that's just not true in life. Like, we have so much abundance that the only time that you will, if you don't have that mindset, then yeah, we can't disagree and still be peers in this industry. And I think that's a massive shame, because that's just not the reality of the world that I've grown up in. And I don't think it is for other people. I just think that's the state of kind of what we're being fed on social media. And it becomes all too real when, unfortunately, like you said earlier, like, this is what puts food on the table, and it is what keeps the lights on. And so when you start to factor in those things and the stress of life and that, then it can feel like a disagreement becomes more violent, but in reality it's not. And having somebody, knowledge is always power, right?
Hmm.
Education, we talked about it earlier, not being the be all and the end all, but education doesn't always mean academia. It just means to gain more knowledge and to layer on information and conceptualize it in a way that allows you to see more perspectives. And
Hmm.
if the more perspectives that you can see, the more people you can help, because it means that you've tried to put yourself in more people's shoes. And if you put in yourself in more people's shoes, then you can connect with them more. And it goes back to that connection, which really is the be all and end all of coaching. It is the
Yeah.
connection. And so disagreeing with people more often might actually be what you really need.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that the connections that I've developed in weightlifting will far surpass my ability to snatch and clean and jerk my current one rep max. And I think that that's an important takeaway. I will be able to have these conversations with you much longer than I'm able to back squat, 120 kilos. And so I think that that is something important for people to take away from this, especially coaches. I have athletes who trained with me for years and now they're off doing other things, which is beautiful. And guess what? I can still motivate them. I can still inspire them. I can still educate them, even when they're not moving a barbell because of that connection, because of that relationship. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things is shout out to both of our coach Danny, but is mine and Danny's relationship now, because when I first learned weightlifting, I think it was back, I came over when I was 22 to the States for the first time, walked into Danny's gym like 10 years ago, and as a weightlifting athlete, and just said, I would like to train with you, and I'd also like to just come and watch you coach. um, this was in his first location before he had a mentorship or internship program, and I just wanted to watch him. And so I would come and just spend time in the gym. And since then, I've opened my own weightlifting club, which, with Danny's blessing, I'd like to add, because I had reached out to him and asked him if how he would feel. I got his blessing, and now we teach level ones and level twos together in my gym. And 10 years later, I'm still trying to snatch and clean and jerk and compete, like you said, but I'm nowhere. I'm not the athlete I was when I walked into his gym. But
Mhm.
we still have a relationship that I value so much because of the amount of conversations and discussions we've had over the years, that I continue to look back on, and I'm just extremely grateful for those. And if we had disagreed on something and then never spoken again, I think we would have probably stopped our relationship about a year in, and we'd have
Right.
missed out on the last 9 years because of a silly disagreement. And
Yeah.
in reality, we work together now. The different perspectives that we have allow us to become a team that I like is more unstoppable than any one of us alone.
And agree. Being on the floor coaching alongside Danny was something that I didn't really envision. Have a very similar story, so maybe there's the Camargo connection there. I
Yeah.
walked in his gym. I said, "Hey, I want to be your athlete, and also I'd like to learn everything I can about weightlifting from you."
Hmm.
And slowly, I was a two session, twice, double session, 6 days a week athlete, training and competing, trying to make it to the highest level. And then I transitioned into wanting to understand counting attempts and competition strategy and improving technique. And I found myself standing on the floor with him having these conversations. And now there's a couple of us in the gym, and it's really interesting to stand on the floor, and we joke about this all the time. We will watch the same lift and disagree on whatever is happening, and we talk about it. And that is such a riveting conversation, because it's not like you're wrong and I'm right, or I'm right and you're wrong. It's, hey, did you see that? What did you think about it? And sometimes we're like, let's agree to disagree on that. And other times
Yep.
it's like, oh man, I never thought of it that way. I like that. I'm going to put it in my toolbox. And it goes both ways. Looking at Camargo with, 20 plus years of experience as a coach, he's still very open to learning and asking questions. And I think that
Massively.
going back to your education, motivation, and inspiring, he is still motivated to learn, to ask
Mm.
questions, to adapt his opinion on things, to change his opinion on things. And I think that that is, to your point, maybe something that we're missing a little bit in the coaching profession.
Absolutely, I completely agree. That's a testament to Danny as a man too. Is his ability to put his athletes first, and something he taught me very early on. And he said, "Mark, it's not about you. It's always about the athletes." And
Mm-hmm.
I have been in since he told me that. That was one of the earliest things he told me, and I've been in plenty of gyms since then. Worked in plenty of gyms, and I've just seen coach after coach struggle because they want to be the best coach.
Hmm.
and they focus on what they can do to become the best coach. And in reality, it's develop athletes. It's hone your craft, and your craft is to be able to better other people's lives.
Yeah.
And so Danny, that humility that he embodies because he is in it for his athletes and not for himself, is the reason he is such a well-known coach today, because he has reached out to me because I have more of a rehab background. And so he
Hmm.
will reach out to me and ask my opinion on something, which is so rare for somebody who is such like my senior as a coach to be asking me. Almost felt the first time I'm like, I think you made a mistake. You know, like, you know, all of this, and he's
Yeah.
so open about that. It really just personifies what we need in coaching to be able to
Hmm.
say, these are my shortcomings. This is something like, because Danny's had a whole life before. Well, he was a junior, obviously a very, very successful junior weightlifter, but then he had a whole career as a police officer and a detective before going back. So it's like
Yeah.
his experiences have been completely different to mine. And going back to that disagreement part, is we all have such different experiences growing up that to think that we would agree on every single thing is kind of asinine when you think about it.
So I want to talk. We've talked very passionately about coaching and our love for coaching and how we're in it for the people. But you and I are both business owners, and so at the end of
Yes.
the day, our passion and what we're doing for people and athletes has to put money in our bank account so that we can feed our families and keep the lights on. How do you juggle the passion for coaching and wanting to make athletes happy with the responsibilities of being a business owner?
With difficulty. um,
Right.
yeah, we all say, we go as coaches, we're always, oh, we would do this for free if we could. Um, but the reality is that we can't. And I have I've been very fortunate that when I started coaching, I was able to shadow some coaches at IMG Academy. For those who are familiar with IMG, it's a massive sports academy, and I saw just what money could buy if you really don't have a cap on it, and it was insane. It really was. And I've also seen the opposite, where you walk into gyms that community, but the barbells are rusty, the equipment's rusty, and it's falling apart. And the owner is just an amazing person, but doesn't know how to run a business. And people are there because of the community, but you hear them talk about the equipment or the cleanliness or the other things that stop those gyms from really getting to the next level and providing an income that a coach is worthy of. A lot of the time is what I would say. Is I think any profession where you are giving back in the way that a coach is giving back deserves the compensation. I'm not talking about millions and millions of dollars, but at least to not have the stress of putting food on the table and paying your bills. But it's the intersection between being able to provide a community and being able to also provide value. And
Mhm.
that's what I've always strove to be able to do, is to find that intersection between the value that IMG provided, where you had everything, you were never left wanting, from PTs to athletic trainers to contrast baths to all of that, to all the equipment you can think of. But then to be able to go into a gym that people literally will donate money just because they love the community. And it's to me, it's, you shouldn't have to ask people to donate money. You should be able to run a business that is profitable and provides value and provides community. But having said that, it is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult, and I think we have managed it so far because of our values, and those values that I talked about, and that open transparency that I have with our members about what we are trying to do, and why we charge what we charge, and being upfront that there was a thought process that didn't just value me as we were coming up with our prices. For example, it valued the customer too. It valued the person coming in the door. And it means that I have no problem being able to also show that value. When people come in and they kind of are asking what they're paying for, I'm able to show them in a very, very structured way, either through like an hourly, like, hey, if you want remote coaching, for example, and I charge X amount, if we break down my overhead and we break down like what it all costs just to have this option available to you, that leaves, let's say, $80. And you want an hour of, we want to give you an hour of coaching a week. That means that the coach is getting paid $20 an hour for that
Mhm.
week of work. And now, what kind of coach would you like? Would you like a level 5 senior international coach? Because if you had anybody at that level in another industry, you wouldn't be paying them $20 an hour. You'd be paying them 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 plus. There are business consultants out there charging $1,000 an hour. And so it may sound obvious, but by kind of talking through why we have this and what we do, I've been able to navigate some of those harder conversations. And then also being okay to say, we talked about it earlier, my gym is not the gym for everybody. And I'm even going through processes to try and make it more accessible for people that might need it, that don't have the financial ability to be there. But I say to people, imagine if everybody in the world had all their financial needs taken care of so that they could just do what they're truly passionate about without having to think about the bottom line. That would be a really amazing place to be at, where nobody is left wanting and able to actually just fulfill their passion without the extra stress. Because I think that extra
Right.
stress is what stifles creativity. And it's the creativity and the passion that drives some of the most amazing accomplishments that humans have done. And as a business owner, that's what I strive to be able to do, is provide something that values everybody involved. And when you are trying to balance that value amongst everybody, I think people resonate with that and then are able to don't feel like they are either being ripped off or that they are absolutely getting a steal, because they understand that this isn't a transactional relationship. I can't give you health, but what I can give you is A, B, C, D, E, which will help you get there. And
Right.
that's I think how we've managed to find a really good place at the moment that continues to grow.
What are the highs of business ownership, entrepreneurship?
I honestly, for me, it's been being able to acquire a new skill set. You talked about it earlier about struggling to put yourself out there. This was before we started recording, and you started a podcast and started talking to everybody, which is fantastic, because I'm not going to lie and say that it's taken me 2 years to get back on here because I was too busy. But I genuinely struggle with that myself, and so when we started Rise Athletics, there's plenty of lows, plenty of highs, and it could be very easy to kind of be like, oh well, I didn't want it to go this way, and make excuses, or I didn't want to do this, or I didn't want to do that. But what it's really given me is, if you're willing to take ownership over tough situations, which starting a business is definitely a tough situation, the growth that it has given me over the last 3 years, I can't say that there is one thing that this has given me, um, because it has given me so much. But I would overall, I would say just the growth as a human being that I've had through tough conversations, having to do things that I don't want to do, being willing to fail and
Mm.
say, I tried my best and I'm going to try again, but do it differently this time. Because again, we go back to social media a lot, but social media is your echo chamber of the perfect life. And you don't put your
Mhm.
down days on social media. And so if you spend too much time, you just think everybody is perfect. And
Mhm.
so that being able to actually live in that reality of, there's going to be a lot of failures, just like there's going to be a lot of failed reps in weightlifting. but the failed reps give you way more information than the made reps. And if you can
Yeah.
overcome that and grow through that hard time, I'm not even going to say it will give you something. It's just an incredible process to be a part of, and to see where I am now versus where I hope to be in the next 3 years of owning a business, and then the next 10, 15, and how many people we can help in the next 10, 15, 20 years of doing this is gives me much more of a sense of excitement than it did at the beginning.
The flip side of that, what is one thing that you learned and maybe learned the hard way about entrepreneurship and business, being a business owner?
You will never, ever, ever be able to clock out.
Fair. Fair enough.
I think so. I've spoke to so many coaches, business, and I would love to as well. I would love to just be able to turn my phone off and say it's the end of the night, or I'm going on vacation. But the trade-off in entrepreneurship is that you will never ever not be on the clock, but you also are never ever going to be. You have complete ownership over your situation, and nobody can come in tomorrow and tell me that I've lost my job. And so there is a lot of security in it. There's a lot of insecurity in it, but overall, I wouldn't want to put my fate in the hands of anybody else.
I agree. I agree. Before I let you go, this podcast is all about going beyond the reps, beyond the sets, beyond the programming. We'll have another episode where we talk about the lack of importance of programming. But beyond all of that, what is your strength in the detail that you'd like to share with listeners? What is one takeaway?
I truly believe in I truly believe that every single person has the ability to transcend the limitations they have if they are put in the right environment with the right people and encouraged the right way. I don't think there is any human being that can't achieve amazing things. We just have to figure it out together.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. This
You're
is
very
great.
welcome.